Hello, I am Dr. Crystal Johnson. I'm an associate professor in the Louisiana State University Department of Environmental Sciences in the College of the Coast and Environment. I have a PhD in microbiology from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And what's funny about me being a microbiologist today is that as a little girl growing up in a small town of Moss Point, Mississippi, I was kind of a germaphobe. I still am to some degree. But when I got to college, I said, hey, maybe I can learn a little bit more about these little guys. And so I started doing research as a college student, and I was hooked. And I hope that by the end of this video, you might be a little bit hooked too. So, what is a microbe? Think about that for a minute. Is it a virus? Is it a germ? Is it bacteria or what?
Well, a microbe is a microscopic organism. So it's an organism that's so small that you can't see it without a microscope. But how big is that? How big is E. coli? How many bacteria are there? You probably have heard the human microbiome, so all of the microbes in and on the body. Of the human microbiome, there are approximately 39 trillion cells, 39 trillion bacterial cells, and there are only about 30 trillion human cells. So yeah, in some ways, bacteria kind of outnumber human cells in and on the average human body. Well, if you imagine one bacterial cell is a salt crystal, that means you could start pouring salt into the flatbed of a pickup truck, average pickup truck, and keep pouring until you fill the beds of 1,000 pickup trucks. Or you can start pouring salt into the Superdome in New Orleans and keep filling until the Superdome is 1/5 full.
So what is a microbe then? You've probably heard of germs and understand why it's important to wash your hands after you eat or before you eat. That's because some germs can cause stomach aches, skin rashes, or even kill you. This is because germs are sometimes what we call pathogenic, meaning they cause disease. But did you know that most microbes are actually not pathogenic at all? In fact, some are actually beneficial. Microbes are the reason you're alive today. Saying all microbes are bad is like saying all snakes are bad, just because a small percentage of them are venomous enough to kill you. You need those snakes. The environment needs those snakes, and we need those microbes. Wait, what? Microbes are mostly harmless? Well, for a long time, scientists were fascinated by the pathogenic ones because, well, they killed people, which of course made them pretty important. The first microbial genome sequences were the usual suspects, the pathogenic ones. But over time, we came to realize, wow, there are a lot of microbes out there, and they're just going along, minding their own business, occupying space, eating, replicating, and oh, by the way, some of them might actually kill the very animals/humans that are providing them with a home. Bacteria are single-celled organisms that grow in a petri dish, or in your mouth, or in your refrigerator, or in your trash, or in a compost pile. All they need is a few things, like sugar, air, oxygen, in some cases sunshine. Fungi are similarly independent. Throw them some sugar and the right conditions and they grow like crazy, often faster than bacteria, which is great if you're making bread, not so great if you're suffering from a fungal infection. Viruses though, oh boy, they're not as independent. They require a host. They can do a little bit on their own, but they need a host to survive and replicate. Sometimes that host is a human. Sometimes it's an orca. Sometimes it's a plant, like a tomato plant. And sometimes the host, get this, is bacteria themselves. Yep, even bacteria can be invaded by viruses. The microbes you've probably most likely heard of are bacteria or viruses or fungi that are capable of causing human disease. Remember, that's called pathogenic. For example, the novel coronavirus that made headlines in 2019, which is, it caused coronavirus infectious disease, also known as COVID-19, which it was called 19 because it made news in 2019. Or the bacteria that have turned the stomachs of carnivores for decades, E. coli. It's one of the most widely discussed and widely studied bacteria in the world. It made headlines in 1993 when a famous restaurant had an outbreak of E. coli in the beef that they used to make their hamburgers. Hundreds of people got sick and some people even died. Despite agriculture's best efforts, it's almost impossible to get rid of these E. coli and other human pathogens. Probably the best approach is to thoroughly cook our beef patties, but obviously that doesn't always work out. And not all harmful microbes are actual human pathogens. Some cause infections in other animals, such as cats or dogs or even tomato plants. That stench coming from your armpits, it's the gas produced by microbes that live there. You don't smell, the microbes do. You know the biofouling, that's the bane of the existence of boat owners around the world? Well, that wouldn't even be possible without the microbes sticking to the hulls of boats and ships in the first place. There are microbes that exist in bodies of water that some would consider harmful. Quick, what do Drew Brees, Adele, shrimp, finfish, and bacteria all have in common? They consume oxygen. Have you ever heard of a dead zone? These exist all over the world. For example, there's one just in the Gulf of Mexico, just south of Louisiana. When a person uses fertilizer, it stimulates the growth of their plants. Great! My azaleas are beautiful. Unfortunately, not all of that fertilizer gets taken up by the plant, and that fertilizer ends up in local waterways where it stimulates the growth of plants. Well, only this time the plants are growing in water instead of soil. What does this look like? It looks like thick green soup. So what do you think that means for the plants that grow beneath the surface of that water? Well, what do plants need to survive? Sunshine, right? Well, if that previously clear water suddenly blocks out sunshine, these plants will die and rot. And rotting means microbes. And microbes, such as bacteria, are kind of greedy when it comes to the consumption of oxygen. So as the microbes grow, they, like humans, consume oxygen. They do something called cellular respiration. So if you think about respiration, they're taking in oxygen. So what happens if there is no dissolved oxygen in a body of water? Bye-bye flounder and shrimp and other organisms that have gills that need dissolved oxygen to be in that water. And that's why it's called a dead zone. There are other pathogenic microbes, such as those that cause yeast infections, flesh-eating diseases, diarrhea after you eat raw oysters. More on that later. Zika, the flu, mumps, measles, the bacteria on your teeth that cause cavities, viruses in the ocean that infect orcas, the microbes that cause ulcers. Spoiler alert, it's not spicy food, it's bacteria. This fear factor is what gets people pretty worked up. But listen, these microbes do not care about you. Just like with the snakes example, their goal is not to kill people or cause infection. These functions have been retained evolutionarily, and that's what keeps the microbes alive. Those functions include eating, metabolism, replicating, occupying space in a habitat, etc. So if you or your dog or an orca or your potato plant happen to represent a fertile spot for these microbes, then they're going to stay. They may kill you. They may kill the plant. They may cause a tiny stomach ache for a few days. They may do no harm whatsoever, and they may even help you digest your food. Listen, microbes don't care whether they're in the human gut, on a dolphin, in a petri dish, on a soybean plant. The phrase I use in my classes is, you gotta eat. So, that's all the microbes are doing. They're surviving. And that's what makes them so fascinating. Quick, I want you to look at your hands right now. How many microbes do you think are on your hands? Millions. Millions. Mostly non-pathogenic. They're all over your body. Having the harmless non-pathogenic microbes there now means that when you do get exposed to the pathogens later, there won't be any room left for the pathogens to take over and cause an infection. Microbes are also great indicators for what's happening in the environment. Want to know how contaminated a river is? Track the microbes. But how might those microbes be beneficial? I'm glad you asked. Do you like ice cream? Do you like potato chips? Do you like pizza? Did you know there is a diverse population of microbes living in your guts that help you digest the food that I just described? If you were to get rid of all of those microbes from the human body, not only would you not be able to digest your food, you wouldn't live very long. And what about those microbes that make the food we eat? Without microbes, yogurt is just old milk. And we'd never have bread or wine or cheese. Do you see the holes in that bread? Who do you think made those holes? It wasn't the chef. It was the microbes. And that insulin your grandma injects into her body, totally impossible without microbes. Bacteria that make billions of copies of the insulin gene. And the vaccines that save millions of lives, from the polio vaccine to the HPV vaccine to the flu vaccine. 2 words: Henrietta Lacks. HeLa-cells. Let's go back to that juicy cheeseburger. Just look at it. Would this be possible without microbes? No. How? Well, let's start with the cows. They provide at least 2 of the things in this picture: the beef and the cheese. And the milk, if you're using milk to make the bread. You know the grass that cows eat? Guess what? The cows are not digesting that grass. It's the microbes doing the heavy lifting. If you were to get rid of the microbes in a cow's rumen, its gut, that poor cow would not survive. It would die from the buildup of undigested plant material. No cheeseburger, no cheese. Imagine a world with no cheese.
Now let's visit the grass and other vegetation that cows, humans, and even Bengal tigers need. Have you ever visited a field with grass, wildflowers, or even shrubs? What are those plants growing in? Soil, yes, but what is soil? It's dirt, yes, but what is dirt? How did it get that way? If a cow or a bird or a snake leaves feces in that field, or if it dies, what happens to it? Yes, it rots, but what is rotting? To the naked eye, it looks like it just disappears after a few days. Nope. The microbes are there doing their thing. They're eating it. They're metabolizing. They're attaching. They're breaking it down. All the biodegradable waste we produce and deposit in landfills or compost piles. That stuff settles, but how is it shrinking? It just kind of disappears. It's the microbes. They're breaking it down. By the way, they're producing fertilizer, but in the process, free fertilizer. They're literally taking the air that we breathe, which is 78% nitrogen, and converting into stuff people pay $7 a bag for at the local big box store. If we just let the microbes do their thing, it's like magic. We're making free fertilizer. Farmers have gotten the memo on this. That's why they rotate crops. Let the microbes that are attached to the roots on those soybeans do their thing. It really is magic. Now let's go to the ocean. Do you like seafood? Have you ever eaten raw or undercooked seafood and then had some gastrointestinal problems later? Well, that's because the ocean does have microbes. But guess what? These pathogens represent a tiny percentage of the microbes in the ocean. Many of them help recycle the waste products that end up there. When a whale dies, when a shrimp dies, when bad people dump human waste, when that paper towel roll ends up from the beach and ends up in the ocean, the microbes don't care. They're like, dead copepod for dinner again? Sure, why not? Not so true for plastic, though. Here are these microbes doing all the work right under our noses, helping us digest our food, fighting off pathogens, and producing vitamins that we ourselves cannot produce. But do they ever get any thanks? Do they get a plaque of appreciation? I don't love all microbes. I don't hate them either, but I do respect and appreciate them. I hope you will too. Next, we will learn about the microbial research being done in my college. Next, we will have Dr. Jennifer Brum, who will tell us about how it's really the viruses doing all the heavy lifting in the ocean. Dr. Sibel Bargu-Atesh, who will explain what it really means when we see that sign at the beach saying, "Don't swim here." Dr. Giulio Mariotti, who will describe how microbes help keep our beaches stable and minimize coastal erosion. And then you'll hear about my precious Vibrios that I love and what they have to do with that old wives' tale that you don't eat raw oysters in months that don't have R. Stay tuned.